The sprawling Thompson estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, stood as a monument to wealth and impeccable taste, its pristine white walls gleaming under the late March sun. Yet, behind this imposing facade, a starkly contrasting drama was unfolding. In the discreet service area, behind the perfectly manicured gardens, Sarah Miller, a determined young woman of 28, struggled with a heavy trash bag, its weight almost as burdensome as her wounded pride. Sarah had arrived at the estate just 2 weeks prior, carrying hopes of a fresh start. With a degree in elementary education, but facing a challenging job market, she had reluctantly taken the domestic position as a temporary solution. What she hadn't anticipated was entering an environment where cruelty was disguised as sophistication. Victoria Hayes, 40, the millionaire Daniel Thompson's girlfriend, watched the scene with a chilling smile. Her eyes sparkled with calculated malice as she ordered Sarah to drag the trash bag to the far end of the property. "Faster!" she barked, her voice echoing through the garden. "An efficient maid doesn't take this long for such a simple task." Unbeknownst to Victoria, Daniel Thompson, 37, had arrived home early from his downtown Manhattan office that day. He was approaching the back of the house when he overheard his girlfriend's harsh tone. Something about her voice made him slow his steps, prompting him to discreetly conceal himself behind one of the garden's ornate columns to observe the unfolding scene. Sarah felt the strain of the trash bag on her shoulders, but the weight of the humiliation was far greater. Her hands trembled, not from physical exertion, but from a simmering rage that intensified with every cruel word from Victoria. The wealthy woman continued her disparaging comments, laughing a cold, mirthless laugh as other household staff watched in uncomfortable silence, too fearful to intervene. "Look at our new little maid," Victoria scoffed, addressing the gardeners who pretended to be engrossed in their tasks. "She can barely carry a trash bag. How ever did she get this job?" Her words sliced through Sarah's self-esteem like sharp knives. Daniel felt his stomach churn as he witnessed the scene. He had known Victoria for 2 years, and while he was aware of her demanding nature, he had never seen such a blatant display of cruelty. His hands clenched into fists as he watched the woman he shared his life with humiliate someone clearly doing their best. Sarah finally reached the designated spot to deposit the trash, her muscles aching, her breath ragged. But it was at that moment that something inside her snapped, not her physical strength, but the invisible chain that bound her to silence. She dropped the bag to the ground with a dull thud that resonated through the quiet garden. The world seemed to pause for a moment. Victoria, a few yards away, stopped laughing. The gardeners looked up from their tools. Daniel held his breath behind the column. Everyone sensed that something profound was about to happen, something that would alter the course of that seemingly ordinary afternoon. Sarah slowly turned, her eyes meeting Victoria's. Tears streaked her face, but they were not tears of defeat. They were tears of a dignity that refused to be buried under the weight of humiliation. She began to walk towards the wealthy woman, each step imbued with a determination that surprised everyone present. Victoria, initially confident in her position of power, began to sense a shift in the air. The cruel smile vanished from her lips as she noticed the transformation in Sarah's gaze. There was something there she hadn't expected to see. Courage. If this story is stirring your heart as much as it did ours, hit that like button to show us you're ready to see how Sarah found the strength to do the unthinkable. And if you want to be part of our community that celebrates stories of courage and dignity, subscribe now so you don't miss out. We have new videos every day. We'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your city in the comments below. The distance between Sarah and Victoria seemed endless in those seconds that stretched into hours. Each step the young maid took echoed in the tense silence that had settled over the back of the mansion. The wind had ceased to blow. The leaves on the trees remained motionless, as if nature itself awaited the outcome of this unlikely confrontation. Daniel watched everything from his hidden position, his heart pounding erratically. He had never seen Sarah react this way. In fact, he had never truly paid much attention to her. To him, she was just another employee in the vast staff that kept his mansion running perfectly. But in that moment, there was something in her eyes that made him question everything he thought he knew about courage and dignity. Victoria, for her part, began to feel a growing unease. Accustomed to commanding and being obeyed without question, she was unprepared for this reaction. Her instincts told her something was wrong, that Sarah was not reacting like the other maids she had humiliated over the years. There was a different kind of strength emanating from the young woman, something that made Victoria involuntarily step back. The other household staff had completely ceased their activities. Old Man George, the oldest gardener, held his tools with trembling hands, witnessing something he had never experienced in his 15 years of working for wealthy families. Mrs. Henderson, the cook, discreetly peered through the kitchen window, her maternal intuition warning her of the danger hanging in the air. Sarah stopped just 6 feet from Victoria. Tears still streamed down her face, but her posture had completely transformed. She was no longer the cornered, humiliated young woman of minutes ago. She'd become someone Daniel didn't recognize, someone who was about to reclaim her dignity in a way no one expected. "Do you think you can treat me like this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling, not from fear but from a deep, uncontrollable emotion. "Do you think having money gives you the right to humiliate those who work for you?" Victoria was stunned to hear the maid speak directly to her, without asking permission, without lowering her gaze. This was unacceptable in her world of rigid hierarchies and absolute power. "How dare you question me?" Victoria retorted, attempting to regain her authority. "You are just a maid. Get back to your work before I fire you." But Sarah didn't back down. If anything, she took another step forward. Daniel could see the determination growing in her eyes, a strength he himself had never displayed in his worst business situations. There was something primal and powerful happening there, something that transcended socio-economic differences. "I may be a maid," Sarah said, her voice gaining firmness with each word. "But I am a human being, and no human being deserves to be treated the way you treated me today." The entire garden seemed suspended in time. Even the birds had stopped singing. Daniel felt he was witnessing a historic moment, not just in the lives of these two women, but in his own existence. For the first time, he was seeing firsthand what his actions, or lack thereof, could cause in the lives of real people. Victoria, accustomed to being feared and respected, felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty, Sarah's posture, the firmness in her voice, the determination in her eyes, all of it made Victoria question her own authority. She had never faced an employee who challenged her in this way. "You don't know who you're talking to," Victoria tried, but her voice sounded less convincing than she would have liked. "I can end your career with a simple phone call." Sarah took another step forward, now so close that Victoria could see every tear that still glistened in her eyes. "You can end my job," she said, "but you can't end who I am." It was at that moment that Sarah raised her hand. Daniel saw it all unfold in slow motion, Sarah's hand moving through the air, the expression of absolute shock on Victoria's face, the dry sound of the slap echoing through the silent garden. The world stopped completely. Victoria brought her hand to her face, her eyes wide with disbelief. Never in her privileged life had anyone dared to touch her in such a way. The shock was so great that she couldn't even form words. Daniel felt as if he had been slapped himself. That sound resonated in his soul in a way he couldn't explain. It was the sound of injustice being confronted, of dignity being defended, of courage finding its voice. "Sarah, even with her hand still trembling from what she had just done, stood firm. She knew there was no turning back. She knew her life would change forever from that moment. But for the first time in weeks, she felt whole again. The echo of the slap still reverberated through the garden as Sarah took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but her voice, when it finally emerged, was clear and firm as tempered steel. Daniel, still hidden, felt his own face burn with shame, as if he himself had been confronted by his omissions and the blindness that had allowed the situation to reach such an extreme. "Do you know what hurts me the most?" Sarah began, her words cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. "It's not the weight of the trash you forced me to carry. It's not the insults you shouted for everyone to hear. It's knowing that there's a person in the world who thinks money gives them the right to destroy another person's soul." Victoria remained motionless, her hand still covering the face where she had been slapped. Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of rage and something she couldn't identify. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps it was the first spark of conscience she had experienced in years. "You look at me as if I'm invisible," Sarah continued, tears now falling freely down her face. "Not as if I have no family, no dreams, no feelings, as if I exist only to serve your cruel whims. But I have a name. I am Sarah Miller. I have a 6-year-old daughter who waits for me at home every day, eager to hear about my workday." Daniel felt as if he had been punched in the gut. A daughter, Sarah had a daughter. In 2 weeks of working in his home, he had never bothered to learn even his maid's full name, much less her personal story. "I wake up at 5 a.m. every day," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I leave my little Lily sleeping to come take care of the house of people who don't even know I exist as a human being. I clean, organize, take care of every detail of this mansion as if it were my own home, because I am proud of my work." The employees around them remained completely still. Old Man George, the gardener, felt tears welling in his eyes as he recognized in Sarah the dignity he himself had tried to maintain over decades, serving wealthy families. Mrs. Henderson, from the kitchen, had stopped pretending to be busy and openly watched from the window, her hand covering her heart. "Do you want to know the difference between us two?" Sarah asked, taking another step towards Victoria. "It's not money. It's not expensive clothes or shiny jewelry. The difference is that I still know what it means to be human. I still remember how to treat people with respect and dignity." Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Sarah's words, like stones being thrown at his dormant conscience. He thought of his own daughter, whom he only saw on weekends after his divorce. Was he raising her to become like Victoria? Were his distorted values creating another human being incapable of seeing humanity in others? "I accept this job because I need it," Sarah continued, her voice now filled with a profound emotion that touched everyone present. "But I will not accept being treated as if I am less than you. I will not accept you using your position to try to destroy my self-esteem. And I definitely will not accept you doing this in front of other people, as if it were a spectacle for your sick amusement." Victoria finally found her voice, but when she tried to speak, only a whisper escaped. How dare you?" "I dare because someone needs to dare," Sarah interrupted. "Someone needs to look people like you in the eye and say, 'Enough.' Someone needs to remind you that money doesn't buy the right to humiliate other human beings." Daniel opened his eyes and looked at Victoria. For the first time, he truly saw not the beautiful, sophisticated woman he had fallen in love with, but the cruel person she had become, or perhaps always had been, and he had simply chosen not to see. You can fire me now," Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. "You can make your calls and try to end my work opportunities, but you will never again be able to say that no one had the courage to show you who you truly are." The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer a silence of tension, but a silence of recognition. Everyone there knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. An ordinary person had found extraordinary courage, and in doing so had exposed truths that everyone knew but no one had dared to verbalize. Sarah took a step back, preparing for the consequences of her actions. She knew she would likely lose her job, knew she might face even greater difficulties, but she also knew she had regained something infinitely more valuable: her dignity. Daniel, still hidden, felt he was at the most important moment of his life. He needed to make a decision that would define not only Sarah's future, but the kind of man he would choose to be from that point forward. Daniel remained motionless behind the column, every word from Sarah echoing in his mind like distant cathedral bells. For the first time in his 37 years, he saw himself truly reflected in the mirror of another person's actions. The courage of that young maid had exposed not only Victoria's cruelty, but also his own moral cowardice, his comfortable blindness to the injustices happening right under his nose. His hands trembled as he watched Victoria try to regain her composure. The woman he had introduced to his friends as sophisticated and elegant was now revealing her true face, a face distorted by arrogance and a complete lack of empathy. Daniel wondered how he had been so blind for so long. Sarah, still standing before Victoria, breathed heavily after her outburst. She could feel the stares of all the employees on her, some filled with silent admiration, others with concern for what might happen next. But she had no regrets. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly alive. You will pay for this," Victoria stammered, still touching her slapped face. But her voice no longer carried its former cruel authority. Something in her was broken, as if Sarah's words had cracked the armor of arrogance she had built over the years. Old man George, the gardener, took a step forward. His grey hair gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his eyes, tired from decades of hard work, shone with deep admiration for Sarah. "The girl is right," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "In 15 years working in this house, I've never seen such disrespect for an employee." Mrs. Henderson also appeared at the kitchen door, drying her hands on her apron. "Sarah is a good girl," she declared, her maternal voice filled with protection. "She works hard, never complains, always polite to all of us. She doesn't deserve to be treated like this." Daniel felt his world crumbling around him. The employees he had practically ignored were taking sides, defending Sarah against his own girlfriend. This forced him to confront a devastating truth. He had created an environment where cruelty flourished while he remained oblivious to it all. Victoria looked around, realizing she had completely lost control of the situation. Sarah's rebellion had inspired other employees to speak up, and that was something her mind couldn't process. In her world, people simply obeyed, accepting their place in the social hierarchy without question. "You're all fired!" she shrieked, her voice cracking at the end of the sentence. "Daniel will hear about this when he finds out how you all disrespected me. He already knows." The voice came from behind the column, grave and filled with deep sadness. Daniel finally emerged from his hiding place, walking slowly towards the group. Each step was heavy, as if he were carrying the weight of all his past omissions. Victoria quickly turned, her face momentarily lighting up with relief at the sight of her boyfriend. "Daniel, thank goodness you're here. This maid assaulted me. She needs to be arrested, and all these employees are rebelling against me." But Daniel didn't rush to comfort her. Instead, he stopped beside Sarah, his eyes truly meeting hers for the first time. In the young woman's eyes, he saw something that haunted him. No hatred, just a deep sadness and unwavering dignity. "I saw everything, Victoria," Daniel said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I saw how you treated Sarah. I saw the cruelty, the unnecessary humiliation, the pleasure you took in diminishing another person. Victoria's face paled. She had never seen Daniel with that expression before, a mixture of disappointment, shame, and something she couldn't identify, but that terrified her. "Daniel! She hit me!" Victoria tried, her voice shrill with desperation. "She needs to be punished." Daniel shook his head slowly. "The only punishment here was what you inflicted on an innocent person who was simply trying to do her job with dignity." Sarah looked at Daniel in surprise. She had prepared to face the consequences alone, to be fired and possibly prosecuted. She never imagined the millionaire would take her side. "Sarah," Daniel said, turning to her, "I owe you an apology, not just for Victoria's actions, but for allowing this to happen in my home, for being so blind that I didn't realize the kind of person I was bringing into contact with good people like you." Tears returned to Sarah's eyes, but now they were tears of a different emotion. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, she felt her humanity being recognized by someone who truly mattered in that house. Daniel turned to Victoria, and in that moment, he made the decision that would change the course of his life forever. The garden remained in absolute silence as Daniel stared at Victoria with eyes she had never seen before. There was no longer the blind admiration she was accustomed to evoking, nor the affection she manipulated with ease. There was something much deeper and more unsettling: judgment. "Victoria," Daniel began, his voice laden with a sadness that seemed to come from deep within. "In 2 years of a relationship, I never truly saw who you were. I was so dazzled by your beauty, your intelligence, your sophistication, that I closed my eyes to signs that I now realize were always there." Sarah stood beside him, still processing the surreal turn of events. Minutes ago, she was a humiliated maid, about to be fired. Now, the owner of the house himself was defending her in a way she never could have imagined. Old man George and Mrs. Henderson exchanged meaningful glances. In their years of experience working for wealthy families, they recognized the rare moments when justice truly prevailed. It was like watching a miracle in slow motion. "Daniel, you can't be serious," Victoria said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "It's her against me. You're choosing a simple maid over the woman you love." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for what he needed to say. When he opened them again, there was a clarity in them that hadn't existed before. "I thought I loved you, Victoria, but now I realize I loved an illusion, a version of you that I created in my head." He paused, looking around at all the employees who had witnessed the scene. The truth is that real love cannot exist where there is no respect for the humanity of others. And what I saw here today was not just a lack of respect. It was pure, deliberate cruelty." Sarah felt her heart race. She had never imagined that her words, born of desperation and wounded dignity, could have such a profound impact. She had spoken for herself, for her daughter, for all workers who suffered in silence. She hadn't expected her words to open the eyes of someone so powerful. "Do you want to know the moment that truly made me see?" Daniel continued, addressing Victoria. "It was when Sarah spoke about her daughter. In 2 weeks, I never bothered to learn the story of a person working in my home. I never asked about her family, her dreams, her needs." Victoria tried one last card. "Daniel, please, you're being emotional. This woman assaulted me. This cannot go unpunished." Daniel shook his head. "She defended herself, Victoria. She defended herself from your cruelty in a way that I should have done a long time ago. Sarah had the courage that I didn't." He turned to Sarah, his eyes meeting hers again. "Sarah, I cannot undo what happened today, but I can ensure it never happens again. You will not only keep your job, but you will have my respect and my protection." Sarah's tears now flowed freely, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. She thought of Lily, her daughter, and how she could tell her this story when she grew up. How she could teach the girl that sometimes, when you stand up for your dignity, the world can surprise you by responding with justice. As for you, Victoria. Daniel returned his attention to his girlfriend. And our relationship ends here. I cannot be with someone capable of such cruelty. I cannot build a future with someone who sees other human beings as objects for their amusement. Victoria was speechless. In her privileged mind, she had never considered that her actions could have real consequences. She had always believed that her status and beauty would protect her from any judgment. "You'll regret this, Daniel," she said, attempting one last show of power. "You're choosing a maid over me. Everyone will know. Your reputation—" "My reputation," Daniel interrupted. "It will be much better when it's not associated with someone capable of such cruelty. And if anyone judges me for doing the right thing, then those aren't people whose opinion matters to me." Daniel looked at all the employees present. "I want all of you to know that this house will change starting today. I will no longer tolerate any form of disrespect or humiliation. You are people, not objects, and you will be treated as such." Old Man George approached, removing his hat as a sign of respect. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. In all these years, I never thought I'd see a day like this." Mrs. Henderson also approached, placing a protective hand on Sarah's shoulder. "The girl did the right thing," she said. "Sometimes it takes courage to show people who they really are." Daniel nodded, knowing that that day would be remembered by everyone as a turning point. But the story was only just beginning. In the days following that historic confrontation in the garden, the ripples of what had happened spread far beyond the walls of the Thompson estate. Daniel had spent sleepless nights reflecting on his choices, on the man he had been and the man he wanted to become from then on. Sarah returned to work the following Monday with a mixture of anxiety and hope. She wasn't sure what to expect, whether Daniel's words had been sincere or just a moment of emotion that could be forgotten over time. But when she arrived at the mansion, she found a surprise that left her speechless. Daniel was waiting for her in the kitchen, along with Mrs. Henderson, who held a steaming cup of coffee and smiled in a way Sarah had never seen before. On the table lay a thick white envelope that immediately caught her attention. "Sarah," Daniel said, standing as she entered, "thank you for coming. I know you must be wondering about your situation here." Sarah's heart raced. Despite the promises made in the heat of the moment, she knew that the reality of business could be different. Perhaps Daniel had reconsidered his words. Perhaps social pressure was greater than his moment of conscience. "I want you to know," Daniel continued, "that everything I said on Friday still stands. More than that, I want to make concrete changes to ensure that you and all the employees of this house are treated with the dignity you deserve." He pushed the envelope towards Sarah. "This is your new employment contract. Not only have I significantly increased your salary, but I've also included health benefits for you and your daughter, paid vacation, and a study plan, should you wish to resume your career in education." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. When she opened it and saw the numbers, her legs almost gave way. The salary was 3 times higher than her previous one, and the benefits were better than she had ever had in any formal job. "Mr. Thompson," she managed to whisper, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," he replied. "You already said everything on Friday. Your words taught me more about dignity and courage than years of formal education." Mrs. Henderson approached and hugged Sarah warmly. "The girl deserves all this and much more," she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "After what she did, we all feel more valued here." Daniel nodded and continued. But that's not all, Sarah. I want you to know that I've hired a specialized human resources firm to completely reformulate the policies of this house. All employees will have fair contracts, regular training on labor rights, and a direct channel to report any type of abuse or disrespect. Sarah could barely process everything she was hearing. In her mind, she was still the young mother who woke up at 5 a.m., worried about how she would pay the month's bills. Now she was being treated not only with respect, but with a generosity she had never imagined possible. "And one more thing," Daniel said, hesitating for a moment. "I would like to meet your daughter, not as an employer, but as someone who recognizes that you are a complete person, with a family that is important to you." Tears began to roll down Sarah's face again. For weeks, she had hidden her motherhood as if it were something to be ashamed of, fearing it might jeopardize her job. Now, her daughter was being recognized and valued. "Lily would love to meet you," Sarah said, her voice choked with emotion. "Adun, she always asks me about Mommy's work, and now I can tell her a story that's truly worth telling." Old Man George appeared at the kitchen door, holding his hat in his hands, as he always did when he wanted to say something important. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "if you'll permit me, I'd like to say that in 15 years working here, I've never seen such rapid and significant changes." "You are doing the right thing," Daniel smiled, but it was a smile filled with deep melancholy. "George, the truth is, I should have done this a long time ago. You've worked for me for years, and I never cared to truly know you. That will change." At that moment, Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen and sighed deeply. It was Victoria. Since Friday, she had called countless times, alternating between attempts at reconciliation and veiled threats about his social reputation. "Excuse me," he said, stepping out of the kitchen to answer the call. "Daniel, we need to talk urgently," Victoria said from the other end of the line, her voice trying to sound controlled but failing to hide her desperation. "You can't really be ending our relationship because of a maid." Daniel took a deep breath. Victoria, we've talked about this. My decision is made. What you did was unforgivable, and what it revealed about your character is something I cannot ignore." "You're making a mistake," she insisted. "Think about your social standing, our mutual friends. Everyone is commenting on your irrational decision. If our friends are capable of approving the kind of behavior you demonstrated," Daniel replied, then perhaps I need to reevaluate those friendships as well." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Victoria had never faced real consequences for her actions and was discovering she didn't know how to handle them. "You'll regret this, Daniel. You're throwing away everything we built together." "No, Victoria," Daniel said with a firmness that surprised himself. "I'm finally building something real, something based on respect, dignity, and genuine humanity, something you were never able to understand." When he hung up the phone, Daniel returned to the kitchen where Sarah was still talking with Mrs. Henderson and Old Man George. Seeing them there, laughing and sharing stories, he realized something he had lost in all his years of financial success. He had found real people with real hearts who valued kindness above all else. "Sarah," he said, "you not only defended your dignity on Friday, you taught me what it truly means to be a decent human being." 3 weeks had passed since that transformative day in the garden, and the Thompson estate breathed a completely different atmosphere. Daniel had fulfilled every one of his promises, implementing changes that went far beyond what any employee had ever dreamed possible. Sarah arrived at work every morning with a smile that lit up the entire house. Her new schedule allowed her to take Lily to school and still get home in time to help with homework. For the first time in years, she felt she was living, not just surviving. Daniel, in turn, had begun to discover aspects of his own home that he had never noticed. He started having breakfast in the kitchen with the staff, learning about their families, their dreams, and their life stories. Each conversation was a revelation about worlds that existed right under his nose, but that his bubble of privilege had rendered invisible. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said one Thursday morning. "I'd like to extend an invitation to you." Daniel looked up from the newspaper he was reading at the kitchen table, a new habit he had adopted. Before, he would have breakfast alone in his office, isolated from the real world that was happening in his own home. "Lily is giving a presentation at school on Friday about professions," Sarah continued, a special twinkle in her eyes. "She would really love for you to come as my special guest. She wants to talk about dignity in the workplace." The invitation touched Daniel in a way he hadn't expected. A few months ago, the idea of going to a public school in Sarah's neighborhood would have been unthinkable for him. Now he felt honored to be invited. "It will be a privilege," he replied sincerely. "But I'm curious, what will Lily talk about regarding dignity in the workplace?" Sarah smiled. That smile had become the light of the house. "She wants to tell the story of how her mother learned that all people deserve respect, regardless of the work they do, and how an important man learned the same lesson." Old Man George, who was pruning plants near the kitchen window, paused to listen to the conversation. In recent days, he had noticed changes in Daniel that went far beyond labor policies. The boss seemed lighter, more present, more human. "Sarah," Daniel said, "can I ask you a personal question?" She nodded, intrigued. "How did you find the courage to do what you did that day? I've been thinking about it a lot. You had everything to lose and nothing to gain, at least apparently." Sarah was silent for a moment, clearly reflecting on the question. "You know, Mr. Thompson," she finally said, "I think it was when I thought of Lily. I asked myself what kind of mother I would be if I allowed someone to treat me in an undignified way. What example would I be giving my daughter about how a woman should accept being treated?" She paused, stirring her coffee distractedly, but there was more. "I realized that if I didn't defend myself, I would be allowing Victoria to continue treating other employees the same way. It wasn't just about me, it was about all of us." Daniel was struck by the depth of Sarah's reflection. She had acted not merely out of emotional impulse, but from a profound understanding of social responsibility and human dignity. "You taught me something I never learned in all the business schools I attended," he said, "that real leadership sometimes means accepting to be vulnerable for a greater cause." Mrs. Henderson appeared in the kitchen carrying a tray with freshly baked cookies and juice. "Snack for our little visitor," she announced with a maternal smile. As Lily ran to grab a cookie, Daniel turned to Sarah. "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Of course," she replied. "Are you afraid of what might happen?" "With all the pressure I'm facing, aren't you worried it might affect your situation here?" Sarah looked him directly in the eyes, and Daniel saw in them the same courage he had witnessed that transformative day in the garden. "Mr. Thompson," she said with conviction, "I've learned that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. If some people can't accept that you chose dignity over convenience, then those people are on the wrong side of history." Daniel smiled, feeling strengthened by Sarah's simple but profound words. In that moment, he knew that no matter what storms came, he had found something far more valuable than social approval. He had found his integrity. 6 months had passed since that transformative day in the garden, and everyone's lives had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Saturday morning found Daniel, Sarah, and Lily in the same garden where it had all begun. But now the space had been transformed into something much more than a simple leisure area. Daniel had converted part of his property into a community center, offering free vocational courses for domestic workers from all over the region. Sarah, who had resumed her education in pedagogy with Daniel's financial support, now coordinated the center's educational programs. "Mommy, look how many people came today," Lily exclaimed, pointing to the group of over 50 people gathered in the garden for the graduation ceremony of the center's first class. Sarah smiled, observing faces that had become familiar over the months. Domestic workers, gardeners, drivers, cooks, all of whom had found at the centre not only professional training, but also a space where their dignity was respected and valued. Daniel approached them, carrying a folder with the certificates to be presented that day. His life had changed dramatically in recent months. Some clients had indeed abandoned him, influenced by the rumours spread by Victoria and his old social network, but others, attracted by his new ethical stance in business, had approached. "Are you ready for the ceremony?" he asked, his smile reflecting an inner peace he had never experienced before. "More than ready," Sarah replied. "Lily insists on giving a speech today." Daniel looked at the girl, now 6 years old, who had become a constant and joyful presence in his life. "A speech about what?" Lily straightened up, assuming a serious posture that comically contrasted with her young age. "About how kind people make the world better," she declared with conviction. Old Man George approached the group, now wearing not gardener's clothes but a simple, dignified suit. He had become the centre's maintenance supervisor, a position that recognized not only his practical skills, but also his wisdom and leadership abilities. "Mr. Thompson," George said, "the graduates are gathered and eager to begin." Daniel nodded, but before addressing the group, he paused and looked around. Mrs. Henderson had become the centre's food coordinator, developing a program that taught nutritious and economical cooking. Several of his former household staff now had important roles in the project. "You know," Daniel said, addressing Sarah, Lily, and George, "sometimes I think about that day 6 months ago, about how one courageous act can change not only our own lives, but create ripples that reach people we don't even know." Sarah took Lily's hand, an automatic gesture that had become even more affectionate since their lives stabilized. "That day taught me that dignity isn't something someone can give us or take away," Sarah said. "It's something we carry within us, and we need to defend it when necessary." Lily looked at Daniel with her bright, curious eyes. "Mr. Thompson, why was that mean lady so bad to Mommy?" It was a question she asked occasionally, trying to understand the adult world with her childlike logic. Daniel knelt to be at her height. "You know, Lily, sometimes people forget that we're all the same inside. They think having more money or beautiful things makes them better than other people. But your mum taught me that what truly makes someone special is how they treat others." Lily nodded sagely, as if processing very important information. "That's why Mommy is the most special person I know." Daniel smiled, feeling his heart warm. "I completely agree with you." The sound of animated voices called them back to the ceremony that was about to begin. Daniel walked to the front of the assembled group, looking at faces that represented stories of struggle, perseverance, and hope. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying a natural authority that came not from social position, but from genuinely earned respect. "Today, we celebrate much more than certificates of course completion. We celebrate proof that when we treat people with dignity and offer real opportunities, miracles happen." He paused, looking specifically at Sarah, who held Lily in her lap. "6 months ago, a courageous woman taught me that real leadership means defending what is right, even when it's difficult. Today, I see dozens of people ready to carry that lesson forward." The applause that followed was warm and genuine. Among the crowd, Daniel noticed some faces that surprised him. Former business associates who had come discreetly to see the project that was being talked about so much. Robert was there at the back of the group, observing everything with an expression that mixed curiosity and something that seemed like regret. Their eyes met Daniel's, and there was a discreet nod of recognition. After the ceremony, as the last guests were saying goodbye, Robert hesitantly approached. "Daniel," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Daniel nodded, and the two walked away from the group slightly. I came here to understand what you were doing, Robert said, looking around the community center. And now, well, now I see. Daniel waited in silence, allowing his former partner to find the words. You weren't having a nervous breakdown, Robert continued. You were finding something that we lost a long time ago. You were finding real purpose. Daniel smiled, but there was no triumph in his expression. Robert, it's never too late to find that purpose. The doors here are always open. Robert nodded slowly, clearly reflecting on the implications of that offer. As the sun set over the garden where it had all begun, Daniel rejoined Sarah and Lily. The girl had fallen asleep in her mother's lap, exhausted by the day's excitement. Sarah, Daniel said softly. Thank you. For what? She asked, genuinely surprised. For teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to do what's right, despite fear. For showing me that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share. Sarah smiled, adjusting Lily in her arms. I should be thanking you, Mr. Thompson. You gave me back not only my dignity, but also the hope that the world can be a fairer place. Daniel looked around at the community center, at the people still chatting animatedly in the gardens, at Lily sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, and felt a profound satisfaction that no financial achievement had ever given him. You know what's most incredible, he said, watching the last lights of the day reflect in the center's windows. All of this started with a moment of courage, a single moment when someone decided that their dignity was worth more than their safety. Sarah gently rocked Lily, who murmured something incomprehensible in her sleep. And a moment when someone chose to listen, truly listen instead of just reacting. Old man George approached them, carrying the last chairs that needed to be put away. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, he said. Oh, damn, but before I go, I wanted to say something. Daniel turned to the man who had become not just an employee, but a true friend. Go ahead, George. In my 60 years of life, I've worked for many different families. Some treated me well, others not so much, but never have I seen someone change so much and so genuinely as you have changed. George paused, clearly emotional. You didn't just change your own life. You changed the lives of dozens of families, and I'm sure these families will carry these lessons forward, creating more change, more dignity, more respect. Daniel felt tears forming in his eyes. George, the truth is, you all saved me. I was living an empty life, surrounded by things, but completely isolated from real people. You brought me back to humanity. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the kitchen door of the center, waving to the group. Hey, everyone, I made a special dinner to celebrate the day. Nothing fancy, but made with lots of love. Lily opened her eyes the exact moment she heard the word dinner, her child's tummy speaking louder than her tiredness. Mommy, can I eat at Mr. Thompson's house again? Sarah laughed, that musical laugh that had become the soundtrack of the new life they built together. And of course, my love, but first you need to wash your hands. As they walked towards the house, Daniel reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. 6 months ago, he was a rich but spiritually bankrupt man, surrounded by people who valued only appearances and social status. Today, he was surrounded by a chosen family, united not by blood or convenience, but by mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared purpose. During dinner, Lily entertained everyone with school stories, imitations of her teachers, and grandiose plans for the future, which included being kind to everyone and having a giant garden like Mr. Thompson's. Mr. Thompson, Lily suddenly said in the middle of a story about a schoolmate, are you happy now? The question, asked with the brutal simplicity only children possess, caught Daniel by surprise. He stopped eating and truly considered the answer. You know, Lily, he finally said, I think for the first time in my adult life, I can say yes. I am genuinely happy. Why? She asked, her childlike curiosity always seeking to understand the world around her. Daniel looked around the table. Sarah smiling as she helped Lily with her fork, old man George telling a funny story about the centre's new students, Mrs. Henderson serving more food with the pride of someone feeding loved ones. Because I learned that true happiness doesn't come from having things, he explained to Lily. It comes from making a difference in the lives of people you love and knowing that those people also make a difference in your life. Lily nodded, as if that made perfect sense to her. Like when I help Mommy and she's happy, and then I'm happy too. Exactly like that, Daniel confirmed, marveling once again at the child's natural wisdom. After dinner, while Lily played in the garden with old man George, who had become a loving grandfather figure in her life, Sarah and Daniel sat on the porch to watch the sunset. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, "can I make a confession?" "Of course," he replied, intrigued. "That day, when I raised my hand to slap Victoria, for a split second, I thought of Lily. I thought, if I don't do this now, how will I look my daughter in the eye tonight?" Daniel was silent, absorbing the depth of that revelation. "But you know what else impresses me?" Sarah continued. "It's that your reaction wasn't immediate. You could have appeared and fired me on the spot, as Victoria expected, but you stopped to truly think about what you were seeing." Daniel nodded slowly. "Dee, I think it was the first time in my life I truly stopped to think about the moral consequences of my actions, or my lack of action." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Lily chase butterflies in the garden, while old man George pretended to try to catch them too, provoking giggles from the girl. "Sarah," Daniel finally said, "have you thought about the future? About what you want for Lily, for yourself?" Sarah smiled, but it was a smile filled with dreams that now seemed possible. "I want to finish my degree. I want to open a school where children like Lily learn not only math and English, but also about dignity, respect, and how to treat people well." "And you will achieve that," Daniel said with absolute conviction. "In fact, I have a proposal for you. What if the community center expands to include a school, with you as the pedagogical director?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Mr. Thompson, that would be a dream come true." "Then let's make it a reality," Daniel said simply. In that moment, as they watched Lily play in the garden where it had all begun, both Daniel and Sarah knew they had found something rare and precious, a shared purpose that would give meaning to all their future actions. The story that had begun with an act of cruelty and a moment of courage had transformed into something much greater, a living testament that when we choose dignity over convenience, when we choose humanity over status, real miracles can happen. And these miracles have the power to multiply, touching lives we can't even imagine, creating waves of kindness that spread far beyond our vision, proving that a single act of courage can truly change the world. One person, one family, one community at a time, Lily ran up to them, breathless and radiant with happiness. "Mr. Thompson, old man George said he'll teach me how to plant flowers tomorrow. Can I?" Daniel smiled, picking the girl up. "Of course, Lily. And you know what we're going to plant?" "What?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Seeds of kindness," Daniel said, "so they can grow and spread everywhere." Lily laughed, finding the idea wonderful without fully understanding its depth. But Daniel and Sarah knew that, in a way, they had already planted those seeds and would continue to plant them every day for the rest of their lives. Because, just as Lily had learned in her school presentation, all people have value. And when we recognize that value, when we defend it and nurture it, we create a world where dignity flourishes and humanity prevails. And that, after all, is the only wealth that truly matters. This was the story of how a moment of courage changed not just two lives, but created waves of transformation that continue to spread to this day. Because when we choose to do the right thing, especially when it's difficult, we discover that we are not just changing the world around us. We are becoming the people we were always meant to be. If you loved this incredible story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing you these heartwarming stories. See you next time.